It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next keynote speaker for WLS 2018, Mr. Jeff Fromm, who attended the London School of Economics and holds a degree in economics from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. He's the co-author of 3 recent books on consumer trends: Marketing to Millennials, Millennials with Kids, and Marketing to Gen Z, which came out this year. So Jeff writes regularly at Forbes and works as a partner at ad agency Barclay. Some of Barclay's current assignments include Amazon, Hershey, and the Missouri Lottery. He will enlighten us on how to attract that elusive millennial. Please welcome Jeff Fromm.
Morning. Just by round of applause, I'm curious, how many of you have a friend who sleeps with their phone? Let me ask the question just a little bit differently. By round of applause, how many of you have a friend who sleeps with their phone on the nightstand next to the bed? Maybe not right in the bed, but on the nightstand next to the bed. Okay. Today's modern consumers are distracted and addicted by the phone. Let me ask a quick hypothetical question. If I had a friend who perhaps sleeps with an open bottle of Mad Dog 2020 on his nightstand, does my friend have a drinking problem or just really bad taste? Bad taste, not a drinking problem. All right, so I wanted to let you know, consumers expect to use their phone all the time. It's not even a phone, it's a modern day Swiss Army knife. There is no intention of them calling you back. If you want to use your phone during the presentation, feel free. If you want to text me, I'm not going to answer. We're talking about youth culture. There's no young people who's going to call you back. And the reality is, if we're talking about youth culture, you might as well be very distracted, because that's the way it is. So be distracted now. I'd hate to have an unfair advantage and have your undivided attention throughout this entire presentation. All right. Do you recognize this family? Yes? It's a modern family. It's a television show, a popular television show in the US and in some countries in the world. And in this family, dynamics are very different. Unlike past families, everyone is involved in decision-making. It's not a male-dominated family. In fact, in today's modern family in the US, 1 in 4 stay-at-home parents isn't a mom, it's a dad. The fastest growing group of people making $100,000 or more in the United States are millennial women over the age of 30. So we have to separate myth from fact. And this family dynamic is very, very different. If you're real interested, you can read a research report I've written, or an entire book on millennials with children. Now, just by a quick round of applause, how many of you had Maslow in your past? Maslow was a 1940s thinker. Quick round of applause if you had Maslow. Great. We all had Maslow. Maslow did not understand modern consumers, because in his theory, food, water, shelter is at the bottom. Nope. Modern consumers need Wi-Fi. I can take away your food, water, shelter, you'll be fine for 30 minutes. No Wi-Fi, big problems. All right, I want to introduce you to Generation Z. And I want to compare and contrast some of the recent research we did on Generation Z, which I wrote about in the book Marketing to Gen Z. Now, you might think, based on the sheets you have in front of you, I am very confused, because I've defined Generation Z in the sheets you have as starting by birth year 1996. He appears to be outside of the age cohort based on this picture, right? No. We're looking at generations not only by birth year, but also by mindset, because we serve consumers across ranges. So I want to first tell you, this cohort is old souls in young bodies. Old souls in young bodies. This means they're going to be more similar to people 30 years older oftentimes than they are to people only 10 years older. So we're going to see a lot of change in the very near future. In the US, there's a lot of conversation around gun violence. This generation, Gen Z, started a movement called Never Again. What are the key learnings for marketers? For marketers, I'm not going to talk about politics. Half of you would agree with me, half of you disagree with me. Of the half who disagree, for all I know in this country, concealed carry is allowed. I don't know. Forget it. I'm not going to argue with you. This generation is looking for what you do. What you do is more important than what you say. So when this started, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, literally had contracts with dozens of companies, all who terminated their contracts at great expense. Litigation with every company, because the NRA has the right to enforce these contracts. No, they understand modern consumers are looking for your actions. So be prepared to live in a new era, an era where story matters less than action. Millennials were known as great collaborators. Collaboration was the word of the day. Generation Z, not so much. Good old-fashioned competition is coming back. Just curious, by show of hands, how many of you heard millennials were all broke, unemployed, living in their parents' basements among a collection of participation trophies that they've never, ever earned? Not true. This generation, all about competition. All about competition. Millennials shared a lot of information in social media, overshared in social media, put all kinds of content out in social. This generation has their privacy meter set very high. They must trust your brand in order to engage with your brand. Trust means security. Trust means taking actions, often that they can't see, in favor of them as consumers. So this generation will look very different at social media and this concept of trust. Millennials forced brands to go paperless. They were concerned about the environment. Go paperless was the word of the day. The next generation, Gen Z, will focus on equality. The word of the day will be equality. They expect equality, equality for all. So understand we're just at the beginning of a wave on the topic of equality. It's just getting started. Millennials were thought to have very short attention spans, very short. There's a myth that Gen Z has even shorter attention spans. And that is not true. All consumers have short attention spans if the content you're sharing doesn't interest them. They're all going to give you no time. So make sure you're creating amazing content, not just ordinary content. Millennials took big risks. They jumped out of airplanes. They did all kinds of things. Generation Z will take much smaller risks. They are more conservative. And it's important to understand this wave of conservatism is just starting. So these are a few differences between millennials and Gen Z. Now, I want to move a little further and share some information. Just curious, by round of applause, how many of you are familiar with the concept of love? Okay, you all have someone in your life you love, you understand the notion of love. Now, again, just curious, how many of you are familiar with the concept of dating? Do I have any dating experts in the room? Anyone who's been on a really sordid date recently that they'd like to share with a few hundred of your closest friends, perhaps? Today's modern consumers are not monogamous. They have preferred brands in a category, and they date your brand before they start to use your brand on a regular basis. And the most loved brands have an advantage in frequency of use. So don't expect today's consumer to use exclusively your brand. They're going to date other brands. The question is, can you create love? There are two ingredients that are really important for love. I expect you may know them: consistency and spontaneity. I say again, consistency and spontaneity. Most large brands are really good at consistency. They don't always get the spontaneity part. Let me give you an example. Tonight I take my date out, and I take my date to her favorite restaurant, and I bring her favorite flowers. Boy, I'm feeling really good. Favorite restaurant, favorite flowers. Let's say I take my date to the same restaurant 100 nights in a row with the same flowers 100 nights in a row. How much spontaneity am I showing my date? Huh? Not very much spontaneity. So, as a brand, we have to understand that we're going to have to give up equity in old schemas, old models, in favor of unproven schemas if we're going to bring spontaneity to this relationship. Consistency, I know you understand. You probably do that incredibly well, or you wouldn't be as successful as you are. Spontaneity is harder. All right. Since you're all familiar with love, I want you to know we did a large-scale research project across industries with consumers based on birth years age 16 to age 65, age 16 to 65. So we're looking across generations, all the way from Gen Z to baby boomers. And what we found was, in terms of love, there is a connection between love and money. I know a few of you are surprised. You thought no connection from love to money. There is a connection between love and money. The most loved brands generate the most money. And 75% of financial performance was pricing strategy and distribution strategy. Pricing and distribution strategy. You're in the lottery business, this shouldn't surprise you. If you have really strong distribution, if you have the right price points across a product set, that's important. That's very important. 75% of your success is that. 25% is likely the mindsets. Our research suggests 25% will be based on these mindsets, which are across generations. And when we did this study, we separated derived importance from stated. Stated is what I say. I said I was going to be healthy today. Did I go to the gym? Nah. Will I later? Nah. Okay, so derived is how I spend my money. Stated is what I say. What we found, 6 mindsets that account for about 25% of your future sales and profit opportunity, okay? The first in importance was social circle, and these are, on average, in order of importance. On average. I have not studied any of the brands in this room specifically. We have studied industry after industry, category after category. So on average, 25% for this, 75% pricing and distribution. If you compete on low price and you seek to have the highest possible payout, retain the lowest amount of profit, this will be less important. This will probably be 15%. If you're not competing on low price, then this will be more important, okay? Let's go through these in order. First is social circle. Social circle is your brand part of cultural conversation. Cultural conversation means you get word of mouth and word of mouse. Word of mouth and word of mouse. Great brands today get both. They're part of cultural conversations. In fact, a quick story. I live in a suburb of Kansas City. I'm at a cocktail party on a Saturday night, and people are talking about a grocery store. Now, I got to tell you, I'm confused. Having a conversation about a grocery store at a cocktail party on a Saturday night makes no sense to me. But the grocery store was Trader Joe's, and Trader Joe's has a very strong social circle. So people were talking about this store in advance of it opening based on the fact that they are part of the cultural ethos. So number 1 in your success factor is likely social circle. Number 2 is self. Self is the emotional connection consumers have with the brand itself. Strong brands with strong emotional connections have very high frequency of use, and they have a price elasticity advantage, which is to say, players play even when the jackpot is small. Players play even when the reward is lower. So, high frequency of use, high price elasticity, strong brands have a very strong sense of self. I suspect you're familiar with Red Bull. Just by round of applause, everyone heard of Red Bull? Great. Okay, so how many of you have actually thought about jumping out of an airplane, particularly after you met Nando yesterday, without the parachute, in a sky suit for entertainment? No. And Red Bull built their entire brand, entire ethos of their brand, on this crazy adventure theme, which isn't grounded in reality. It's a theme of aspiration. Third is innovation. Now, innovation is interesting. I led the first large-scale study done on millennials as consumers in 2010 with the Boston Consulting Group and Barclay in a partnership, and we published that study. Innovation was not on the radar. Innovation did not appear in the research. Today, as I've looked at our data year over year on a longitudinal basis, innovation is increasingly important. Which means the elephant in the room for you is today's consumer expects things that you aren't likely doing today. That could be delivery of your product through different distribution channels, through mobile technology. That could be new products that don't exist, new adventures that haven't been tapped into. And the other piece is if we look at the highest performing companies, they usually have a very high employee innovation culture. Not talking about the products you create. In addition to the products you create, they typically have very high employee engagement around innovation. This is a major change we've seen over the last 8 years. Next on the list is trust. Great global brands, great strong brands are high trust brands. It's required in the lottery business. If consumers don't trust the brand, they're not going to participate. You won't have the frequency of purchase that you need to be successful. Trust is about remarkable consistency. It takes a long time to earn trust, and if you have a problem, you give it back very quickly. You give it up fast. So understand trust is one of these bifurcated, separated kind of variables. It's typically you either have it or you don't. It is not usually a good idea to communicate trust messages through marketing and advertising. In our study, we found most often that was a failure. So understand trust is through the actions you take, through your salespeople, through your marketing, through your operations. It's all of the things you're doing, and rarely can you communicate your way out of that through advertising. Fifth on the list is purpose. Purpose is important. It drops to number 5, but when all things are equal, oftentimes purpose becomes a differentiator. So given 2 choices of things that might be similar, given the fact that the price of items might be similar, purpose can be a differentiator. Now, I have some people here from Europe. I suspect you're familiar maybe with Tony's Chocolonely. It's a chocolate brand, yes? A few of you. Tony's goal, yeah, I see a few hands. Tony's goal is to eliminate slavery in West Africa. So they pay a premium for the product they receive in the raw material ingredients they make. They have a purpose. I'm working on new research and a new book, which I hope to have out later next year, on purpose. Because what we're seeing in our data, even though it drops down to number 5, there are a lot of ties on the first several things. I already trust your brand. Well, how much incremental gain can I get? If you already maximize trust, there's 0 incremental profit for you on trust. If you've already maximized innovation, 0 incremental gain on innovation. So even though purpose often comes down a little bit, understand when you look at the data, getting credit becomes very important. Are you getting credit for your purpose? Because if you're not getting credit, this could be one of the big opportunities many of you have. You may have a purpose gene that you have that you're not getting full credit for among people who are not your highest fans. And then finally, accessible. The key word on the slide you see is hyper. It's not about being useful, and it's not about being convenient. Hyper useful and hyper convenient. For the past 7 years, my partner in New York City has been working with a little brand called Amazon. Now, this little company is unique because they're willing to give up all the equity they have in their old model in favor of new models all the time. And most successful brands won't do this. The biggest risk many of you face is probably around being hyper useful and hyper accessible. And understand those definitions may look very different for a 22-year-old than a 62-year-old, which means you're going to have to think about your product set and your distribution set through 2 lenses and separate out how you view the problems and opportunities you have. So these 6 factors on average, unless you compete on low price, are about 25% of your go-forward sales and profit growth opportunity. I want to shift directions a little bit and talk about some new frameworks. How do we apply the research I've shared to the brands you have, and how can I take this home and work on my lottery in my country? So the first of the frameworks I want to talk about is around only remarkable experiences being amplified, and it's related to the social circle I discussed. If I have an amazing experience with your product, and I don't put it in my Instagram or social feed, does the experience exist? No. Your job is to create opportunities for consumers to curate their social feed. Modern consumers are buying products and services from companies that help them curate their identity. So only those things that are remarkable get amplified. This is really important. As you think about this, most of the brands in the room grew up in an era of storytelling. And the most successful brands in Tomorrowland will be story living. Story living and storytelling are not the same. They both have a common word, and that's story. But today's modern consumer understands that it's their story. They want to co-create the story. They want to co-create the products. They want to co-create the experiences. They want to co-create the adventures that they're going to take. So how do you change your model to this new model where the consumer has partial control of your brand and your experiences? The next piece of this is brand behavior becomes the positioning of Tomorrowland. Used to be you had a core user, a reference point, and a brand payoff. And any good strategy professional could come up with a brand strategy. So think about it this way. To thirsty, sweaty jocks, core user, this Florida company was the original sports beverage that enhanced performance. And when I say that, you would immediately probably think of a global brand called Gatorade. To thirsty, sweaty jocks, Gatorade is the original sports beverage that enhances performance. Core user, reference point, brand payoff. In Tomorrowland, when we're story living, it's going to be showing actions in favor of this. What are the partnership strategies you take? What are the actions your brand takes? Not just what are the advertising messages that your brand shares via traditional means of communication. So I want to illustrate this, and for some of you, it might feel like this isn't that far away, but this was a US campaign for a beer company that's a little bit traditional typically in their nature. It's called Heineken. And they were leaning into a theme young people have around adventure. Part of what the lottery offers is a little taste of adventure. Let me show you how Heineken leaned into the adventure theme.
And take your chances? You would have to go right now. You have to change your plans.
No way we can change these plans.
No.
This is a bachelor party.
I have to go through security, get on a plane, and go back to my real life.
You know, it really sounds tempting, but
How come you can't cancel the trip?
because it's for work.
No, I'm afraid not.
Right now, I'm going to where I have to go, so...
Yeah?
You know, I don't think I'm that adventurous.
Shit, why not?
I love it!
Yeah.
I love it!
Let's go.
You're gonna press the button. Wherever it goes, that's where you're going. You're
All right.
changing those plans and going in a heartbeat.
How committed am I to whatever comes up here? Is that where we're going?
Yes.
All right.
Here we go. We want Morocco, right? Woo! Uh-oh. Looks like Cyprus.
I'll do Cyprus.
You'll do Cyprus?
I'll do
Woo! How about Laos? How about Portugal? Thailand?
Wow. This is real, right? This is actually gonna happen.
It's so random. You're either gonna kill me or you're gonna like laugh.
Hey, Dan, what's up? It's George. Some weird news, I guess. It doesn't look like I'm gonna be able to make it out there, but I may make it out there sometime after I'm back from Thailand.
I have no idea what you're saying. Are you going to Thailand no, I have to cancel my flight. She'll be pissed. Yeah.
Are you crazy?
Maybe. I don't know.
So where's the button? I'm ready to push the button, Ruffle. I'll see you
Let's
later.
go home.
I'll see you later. I'm going to push the
Oh,
button.
I want to go home.
Let's go, Laos.
Go to Laos.
So the key takeaway here, here's a large brand with a lot of equity in other models of marketing that's leaning into an obvious theme that consumers have around adventure and trying new things. That's the key lesson for you as you take it home. Second framework I want to get into is to embrace a culture of content. I said there's a myth, consumers don't have short attention spans. They have ridiculously short attention spans if you give them bad content, okay? Don't do that. But today's modern consumer is a just-in-time buyer, and just-in-time buyers want just-in-time content. The best brands in Tomorrowland, the best, are going to identify the 3, 4, or 5% of your current buyers who are active in content on your topic and merge the data sets in order to create a social CRM model where 3, 4, or 5% of your active players are going to talk about the topic to the less active players. And in Tomorrowland, each brand, I believe, will need a model that looks like this. You're going to have planned and unplanned, proactive and reactive opportunities. You will need a strategy for each quadrant. There are times when you should participate and times when you shouldn't. And you should predetermine the obvious opportunities to participate and not participate. We can't call a meeting every day when there's an opportunity to discuss the issues we have. You should be able to guess what the most likely things will be. Give you a couple of examples. First, let me introduce you to Marissa. Marissa works at Dairy Queen, and Dairy Queen is a client of ours. And Marissa has gone to Twitter, and she is not excited about working on Free Cone Day, but let's just be clear. How many of you would be excited to work at Dairy Queen on Free Cone Day? It's not going to be fun. It's going to be crazy. So we have set up a social media command center, and there's a team who's monitoring the center. And the woman who's running the team sees this, and she reacts on behalf of the brand. Hang in there, family member. How long is your shift? Wow, Marissa's thinking, someone's paying attention, this is great. And Marissa's not alone. There are lots of employees who feel this way. So on behalf of Dairy Queen, the woman running the center says, hey, we're paying attention to you. We know you're working 3:30 to 9. They're tweeting back and forth, right? Marissa starts to wonder what's going to happen next. And we send Marissa this tweet right here. Now, what's Marissa going to do when she gets this tweet? She's going to laugh and share. Laugh and share. What we see very quickly is hundreds and hundreds of Dairy Queen employees laughing and sharing because they're all sharing this content. They know each other. They work in the same community. What happens when employees who work on the front lines have a better day? Our guests have a better day. What happens when our guests have a better day? Warren Buffett has a better day, right? Ultimately, it's an ecosystem. Employees having a better day mean guests having a better day. Guests having a better day mean shareholders have a better day. And that's not only what we saw in terms of the theory, but when we dug into the data, we could actually see it worked just like the theory. So, how many of you have opportunities that you never see that look just like this in the lower left quadrant? My guess is it happens all the time. The question is, are there certain opportunities that you can spot and then act on to change consumer views? And sometimes employees or participating retailer views are just as important as consumers, because that's the front line. Now let me share a second example of content. This example is from the Missouri Lottery.
You may not see where your dollar goes, to the potential it nurtures, to the future it fuels. But with every dollar you spend, you're supporting Missouri public education. Even if you don't see the change you're making, Our students do. Thank you for playing it forward.
Remember, one of the things many brands have is an opportunity to get credit for something. If you're a purpose-driven brand and consumers aren't giving you credit, that's an opportunity, that's a gap. And you have to do research to understand whether or not you're getting credit for the thing that is important to your lottery. So that's an example of short content. That's an upper right quadrant example. All of us have content opportunities in all quadrants, and we have to be prepared to act very quickly with content. The third framework is around innovation. I told you I led the first research with the Boston Consulting Group on millennials as consumers in 2010, and innovation was not an important topic. Today, innovation is very important. Today, I would argue, not only do consumers expect innovation, but to maintain the level of employee engagement you want to maintain, employees expect it too. The challenge for many is understanding there are different types of innovation. In this pyramid, I have separated sustaining innovation at the bottom and disruptive innovation at the top. Sustaining innovation are the things you can do now that in 6, 12, or 18 months, depending on your time frame, you can deploy. And you're looking for rational ROI, return on investment related to that innovation. This might be 90 or 95% of your innovation puzzle. But just like you have a portfolio of products, I want you to have a portfolio of innovation. And a portfolio innovation means you have some blue ocean or disruptive innovation. Whether that's 2% or 8% is for you to determine, but there has to be some. And there are two questions that aren't in the book that you have to ask and answer yourself, and only two, because it's not rational ROI. In disruptive innovation, the two questions are, is this consistent with our brand authority? Is it consistent with our brand authority? Can we afford to make the bet? And if the answer is yes, yes, then you should put it in that. Now, our team has done a lot of innovation consulting work with companies all around the world, from Germany to the US and everywhere in between. One of the things I've seen is that companies often reject the innovation opportunities in front of them. I have never worked with Gillette, never. I promise a good 2 to 3 years before the Dollar Shave Club existed, people at Gillette had ideas around the notion that there was friction in the distribution model, and we needed to address the friction. Now, I know you aren't interested in the razor category, but I assure you the parallel is there, because there are probably frictions in your distribution model between how you distribute your products today and how some of your future consumers likely want it. But at the Gillette company, where I've done no consulting, they said, no, 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 this is inconsistent with our pricing strategy. And what happens is a new entrant comes in, and the new entrant takes a lot of share. So understand, you need a portfolio approach. I want you to use a separate model of measuring. I want you to use traditional ROI for the bottom of the pyramid. I want you to use the top questions, the top 2 questions I gave you for the top of the pyramid, and put a couple of percent, 3%, 5%, 7% in disruptive. Because otherwise what happens is you do a great job of sustaining innovation and you never get to the disruptive. And eventually we know that disruptive innovation happens in category after category. Otherwise, we wouldn't see brands like Airbnb, Amazon, Netflix, Uber, and a whole bunch more. They're all there because of disruptive innovation. For innovation, we have a fundamental issue. My mother taught me the golden rule. I hope your mother taught you the same. Do unto others as you want done unto yourself. A fabulous rule for life. A terrible rule for innovation. Do not use this rule for innovation. You and your consumers may not be the same. The rule for innovation is the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is to treat others the way they want to be treated. To understand their play states, their day part needs, their need states. And they can change. What I might want at one point in time may be different than another. One play state may vary from another play state. And I have to look across the portfolio of players we're trying to serve. So the platinum rule needs to replace the golden rule. Your views are less important than the consumer's view. Now, this is a simple example. It's near the Atacama Desert here in South America. And the school is a university for engineering. And they're simply taking an advertisement and converting it into something useful. Because the golden rule for innovation is be more useful. And this outdoor board turns air into drinking water in an area where hundreds of thousands of people have no portable drinking water. They're trying to recruit engineering students. Isn't this a brilliant example right here in South America of innovation on advertising for an engineering school, huh? Fourth, and finally, is to engage employees first. When we look at the high-performing companies, whether that's Amazon or any number of other companies, we find high levels of employee engagement. Employees are super passionate about the brand. And the most loved brands, I told you they make the most money. So we had to look inside our organization. We have about 400 employees. We work across a variety of brands. And we've been in the same program for years called Bring Your Kid to Work Day, which if you're a 32-year-old mom with a 6-month-old baby, Bring Your Kid to Work Day sounds terrific, right? No, not so terrific. See, people are starting families later. Bring Your Kid to Work Day wasn't that relevant. And we kept celebrating Bring Your Kid to Work Day. We had a lot of equity in this old schema, and we realized a couple of years ago we needed to change that. So we introduced a new program, something more relevant to our employees. It was called Bring Your Parent to Work Day. And what I'd like to do is show you this quick video around Bring Your Parent to Work Day.
I'm not sure why he chose advertising.
I think advertising chose him.
My husband laughs all the time. He said that she goes to work and does Facebook basically all day long. So,
and I'll say, what did you do today? And it usually just sounds like he's eating out or editing video.
Can we revisit just the strategy first? You know, what led to taking this approach?
Has anybody ever experienced virtual reality?
Oh, Dick, you should see this, honestly. Oh my gosh, I'm falling.
Welcome, moms, to the Social Command Center at Barclay. DENK is like a term they use that say, like, this is a good, high-quality thing. And it comes from weed culture for that.
Oh. You're like, it's dope, it's good, yeah. It's like whatever, dang.
How heavily are you ingrained in the weed culture?
Not heavily.
Okay.
Spirit Airlines, how can we make a 4th of July themed email a little bit weird?
What about the founding mothers? You know, they never get mentioned.
Yes.
Oh, look at this. Oh, my word. Oh, I'm glad I went to the restroom.
No body hair. Some off of the legs a little bit. He's a pretty hairy guy. Some on the happy trail.
This is an easy one to wrap up. We have the Founding Fathers got around, and so can you. I think this is a solid email. I'm gonna type it up so we don't forget it. I'm putting that in for July 4th.
I'm just tickled pink that I got to be here, and I hope I get a chance to come back again sometime.
I just know she's awesome, and that was just an affirmation.
I love knowing you all, knowing he's with people like you all. That's so cool.
I learned that I'm really proud. I'm really glad that you're doing what you love with really cool people. Sorry.
You're making me cry.
What's interesting is this doesn't really cost a lot, right? We have all kinds of benefits for our employees. And we looked at the research among the 400 employees, and we found this had so much impact and drove so much love for our employees, for our brand, relative to this small investment of time and money, and then these other things were taken for granted. So ask yourselves, what new things can we do for our employees, because those are the people who are going to help you have the most success you can have. I'd like to make sure you know I actually did build this through research. Since 2010 in the study I led with the Boston Consulting Group, we've published several dozen studies and 3 books. If you're interested in some of the research, I'm happy to share it. It's mostly free and mostly available online. Lest you panic that you're going to have trouble finding any of this, you can download the entire presentation at the barclayus.com link /World Lottery. So when you go home, you have the file. It is a copyrighted file, so don't repost it and reshare it. It's for you to discuss with your team. And if you want to get in touch with me, my email is right there. I have a final thought. Each of you is here because you've had a lot of success in your past. You've driven sales growth, you've introduced new products successfully. In Tomorrowland, some of the things you've done in the past will help you be more successful, and some may slow you down. And it's important to understand tomorrow's consumer is really expecting a lot from your brand. Being more convenient and more useful will be the price of admission for those of you who want extraordinary financial performance. Thank you very much. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here.